Are you recording this? Okay, I usually remember that about 10 minutes in. Welcome to our August 19th Development Activities Meeting. I'm Barbara Rudiak, President of the Southside Community Council. If you're new to these meetings and want to know more about the Southside Community Council as a registered community organization and the development activity meetings, I'm asking that you visit our revised website where we provide an explanation. In addition, these presentations will be going before the Historic Review Commission, and our website also provides information about the East Carson Street Historic District Guidelines. I also want to say that these projects are focused on what is going to be presented to the Historic Review Commission. The presenter is not equipped to I guess, engage with residents about their concerns about the future closing of Rite-Aid on the 2300 block of Jane. That is not the purpose of this meeting. So any questions or comments should be focused on what is being presented. So with that said, next we will have Stephanie Joy will share how to participate in this virtual dam. Our two projects relate to the after the fact approval of Rite-Aid facade painting at 1915 East Carson Street, and then the renovations to the Southside Works retail space for pharmacy use, which is 2655 East Carson Street. And if you're from Southside, you recognize that as the former American Eagle store. And then for each, we will share the next steps in the process. So Stephanie Joy is going to share how to participate in the dam.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Joy. I'm a senior planner with the Department of City Planning. And so tonight, Barbara and I are sharing moderation duties with the question and answer session. And I'll also be acting as your neighborhood planner and taking notes in the background that will be provided to the board and commission. And I just want to note about that staff report, you know, it doesn't make any conclusions about what is said here. It's basically just, you know, a reporting of that information. So if you have strong feelings in either direction, I recommend that you participate providing information and opinion to the board and commission that makes the decision. But how you do participate in this virtual meeting is you have a number of options. Basically, you can type your questions into the Q&A tool, and then I will read those out loud for the panelists to answer. You can also use the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and then we will unmute you in the order that was requested. And for anyone that's calling in, if you press *9 on your phone, then that will raise your hand and we'll announce the last 4 digits of your phone number and unmute you when it's your turn. If you have any technical issues, feel free to use the chat feature and we'll try to help you through those so you can participate. We are recording this, so there will be an opportunity to go back and re-review it. Barbara's very good about getting that online. And so presenters, I just want you to keep in mind that we might have some people that call in, so please clearly describe what's on the screen, especially for those that may not be able to follow along visually. And then I'm going to pass it back to, I think, Barbara.
Yeah. So our first project, first presentation is related to 1915 East Carson Street and the painting of the facade. So Dean Jovichin, I hope I pronounced that correctly, will be.
You did, yeah.
Dean, are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, I'm attempting to do that right
Okay.
now.
Okay, let me know if you have any issues. Oh, we can see.
Yep.
Okay, what I'm showing here is the rebrand effort that Rite-Aid made, and it the package that we sent to planning and zoning was the sign package that they originally, well, it was a sign package that was approved, and they thought that they were getting the painting and the facade work that they were proposing approved. So it was a misunderstanding on the Rite-Aid thinking that they got the paint approved. It's really the existing brick was painted a little bit of an off-white, and then at the base where there's a change in materials, that's a little bit of a darker color. And we can, if I switch over to a street view, we can see that while there's context for the brick that was originally approved, we can also see down the street there's context for where brick was painted white. And considering the shops around it and the kind of the alternating brick and white painted brick, it appears to be in context with the neighborhood.
So are you ready for questions and comments?
Yeah, that's the extent of it. They also painted the back. I don't know if that is an issue too. That's also shown in that packet that was part of the sign package where the painting was done on back.
So if anyone would like to start with questions and comments, but Stephanie Joy, before that, would you elevate Mike Clark to a panelist?
Sure.
Thank you.
It does look like we have a few hands raised. I think Bob Russ was first and then Frank.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
So Dean, thanks. Dean, did you receive a C of A from HRC for the sign?
I'm sorry, what?
A certificate of appropriateness for the sign? Or was it just approved by zoning?
No, I don't know. Well, what I have is part of is in the package that was submitted. I don't know if there was a certificate of appropriateness. I think that would have, in that case, if they had applied for one, I think that would have triggered this meeting and the HRC.
Not always.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
not
sure.
always. Yeah, if it was just the signage, very often HRC will approve signage over the counter, which means one of the staff members will approve it if it complies with the guidelines. So that's sometimes an area, if it was just being reviewed as signage, will skip the LRC, DAM, and HRC process. So I was just curious to see if even you received a C of A, and they'll issue you a certificate of appropriateness just for the sign, so that you can change the signage. We would like to know if that was done or if you did not even receive that. And then it's just so to explain something, I'm part of 5 members of the local review committee. We're an advisory group. We're going to try and advise you on steps to take here so that you can go through the HRC process. So I was just trying to kind of determine where the ball was dropped here, or where the city process kind of misstepped or wasn't followed through on. When you went into zoning or city planning for other parts for the signage, I mean, did you get any permit whatsoever? A sign permit, I think, is the second step through zoning.
Oh, well, don't know.
Okay,
I
well,
was
check
not
on
part,
that.
I was not part of the sign submission
Okay,
or any submission prior to finding out that there was an issue
okay,
with the paint.
And Bob, I don't know if I can be of any help here. When a resident submitted a 311 because the building had been painted, the response came back that there was a permit that had been issued. And when you go into, when I went into building it was specifically for the sign, not for any kind of painting.
right. But which agency in the city issued the permit? You know, it's a two-step thing that they would have had a permit for the sign, I believe, through city planning or zoning or whatever, and then a sign permit, and then there'd be a separate step to either go through HRC if the sign is somewhat questionable as to whether it meets the guidelines or not. Or like I said, sometimes Sarah Quinn will approve signage over the counter and issue a C of A for the signage as a change, is my belief from my understanding of the process, although we don't see those at the community level if they're done over the counter and they're not really reported in the HRC minutes. So they kind of slide under the radar sometimes. So I was just curious as to where and what permit they received. I think that should be clarified when you go into HRC, Dean, as to what you had and didn't have.
Okay.
I don't see a problem with the sign, assuming the letters are less than 18 inches. That's what the guidelines say, but that wasn't the controversy here. What triggered the 311 was the painting of the facade. Because are you familiar with the East Carson Street Historic District guidelines?
Not intimately, no.
No, okay.
I've read through them a little bit.
Okay. So specifically, and our issue down here is there's been a number of these. Unpainted masonry is stated twice in the guidelines is should not be painted. There's a lot of reasons for that, predominantly just to protect the brick facades of the older buildings. A painted coating can kind of trap moisture and cause damage over time. It also takes, brick materials will last, over 100 years, 200, 500 years, and not have to do very much other than clean them and repoint them from time to time. And then you take that facade and you paint it. Now it becomes a maintenance issue and something that peels and flakes and degrades over time in a much faster process. So for any number of reasons, the guidelines address that by basically forbidding it or prohibiting that. So that's what triggered the 311 and sort of got people interested in this project as kind of a violation of the guidelines. So you have an option here to present your case, I guess, to the HRC on the merits that you kind of put forward here, but I think the community and the LRC will go and ask the HRC to ask you to restore this facade, as we have in the past with other business owners who have painted it without permits and without permission. And there are a couple active other 311s in the district now for similar kind of missteps. And others that have covered over old facades with other materials without permits and C of A that are going through a process of restoration, meaning the materials are coming off and the original brick is being brought back, or some remediation plan is put forth. So the guidelines talk about how to clean masonry and restore masonry, meaning you can't sandblast it. You'll have to find and do some testing probably, or we will advocate to have HRC ask you to do some test stripping of the paint and find a method that would take the paint off the building. And that's probably the way we're going to go initially.
Okay.
Unfortunately for you, in that we've had many other national brand chain businesses come into the district and want to do things to brand their business and not, follow the guidelines. And we've had pretty good success in HRC upheld their guidelines, and Burger King to the BP stations to Amoco. Everybody's had to kind of address their branding issues and kind of conform to the district guidelines. So you won't be alone there.
Okay.
And I do want to say that it may have been January. It was sometime in 2021, prior to this occurring. The Southside Community Council did send to property owners a letter, and very specifically saying that if anything is to be done to the outside facade of the building that they own, that they really needed to go to the Historic Review Commission to see what was permissible and what would not be. And I'm looking here, the property owner, I believe, is a Daniel Kamen, who lives in Pittsburgh, South Highland Avenue, and he would have received that letter and as the property owner. So I just wanted to share that prior to 2021, there were some instances where property owners said, we weren't aware of the historic district guidelines, and that was not an excuse for them, but we really felt it important to provide that letter so that it was something that they understood. The guidelines have been in effect for many, many years, but if you're not actively looking at them or on East Carson Street, you may not realize that you're in a historic district and there are guidelines that need to be followed. So it was our intent to keep that in the forefront for property owners.
I'll add, and Barbara alluded to it, or I think you mentioned it, the back facade is also in the district. The front and backs of the buildings are, that are in the district, or the entire building's in the district. So, that may be an issue as well. I'm not familiar with the back of this building, if it was brick or concrete block or what it was. Do you know?
I'm looking here. It was, I believe, shown in this.
Brick.
There it is.
I think it was previously painted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in that case, so two things happened. If it was painted when the district guidelines came in, this building, I think, predates the guidelines. It was an infill building when an old theater burned down, and but was kind of done with the district guidelines, were on their way. I forget who did this, and I'm forgetting my dates when exactly this structure was built. But you can see in its design, it kind of makes some gestures towards trying to be fitting into the district. But specifically on this back facade, if it was painted and had been painted, for the decades the district guidelines have been in place, then previously painted masonry can be repainted. So I would say if it was painted and we can prove, or you can attest or prove that it had been painted for many, many years, or else when the building was built and predating the guidelines, then you would be allowed to repaint that. So that's not the controversy here then.
Okay.
So that's half a consolation prize, I guess.
And I think in referencing some of the other buildings on East Carson Street and saying that they are painted, I think as Bob said, that very well could have been that they had been painted prior to the guidelines, and so they're not restricted by the guidelines. Would I be correct on that, Bob?
Yeah, that's correct. If they're grandfathered in, because some historic buildings were painted historically, from the get-go. So it's not just the fact that they were painted or unpainted. It's sort of what was in place when the guidelines came in. And if they were unpainted brick or masonry, when the guidelines came in, you shouldn't paint them. There are cases, a few instances, where they have allowed buildings in unpainted brick and masonry to be painted. Usually it's when the building has been so kind of butchered up in past years prior to the guidelines, where windows were replaced and infills were made and the brick doesn't matches, or there's something inherently kind of distressed about the brick, where they kind of see the advantage of painting it, either to basically cover it up and homogenize it. So there have been a few instances in the past 20 years or 15 or so that I've been on the committee where HRC has allowed a brick facade to be painted, but they're pretty far and few between, and they're not often. There has to be another extenuating circumstance, which I don't see here in this facade.
Lynn, I just want to express that even though Bob is talking with you about, really the facade, and that we're, say, as one person, he's talking about wanting the paint to be removed. I think many of us are we're in concert with that. So just know that it's just not Bob or Barbara, but there are several of us on this call, and we all feel very strongly about the same thing. So I think that's the important thing to share when you have to go back to Rite-Aid and they have to figure out how to remove this, especially before you go to the, with the HRC regulations. We're trying to be much stronger, and we're trying to be much more, especially after the pandemic, much more proactive, even with many of the other facilities or other storefronts that are on East Carson Street. So you're not the only one, just so that you know that.
Okay.
So Frank and Jackie had comments or questions?
Yeah, mine was just out of curiosity. It's a moot point, but I'd still be curious as to why Rite-Aid felt the need to paint this facade. Our understanding was that you're rebranding, and I get that as far as the sign goes, but I also was in the Rite-Aid on Forbes Avenue in Oakland, which is brick facade, and the one in Squirrel Hill at Forbes and Murray, which is brick, and neither one of those have been painted. So what was the rationale for having to paint this? Because from our perspective, as Quay Lynn just said, the front looks perfectly fine to all of us.
Well, I frankly can't speak to the motivation of Rite-Aid and why their decisions. I can't speak to the motivation or the
Okay.
or the why or the
Okay.
why. Right?
And Jackie?
Thanks, Barb. Dean, can you describe what's your relationship to Rite-Aid? I don't think you were introduced in the beginning of this call.
Okay. Yes, I'm an architect, and I work with Fabo Architecture, and Rite-Aid's a client of ours, and they asked us to begin this process for them.
Okay. And is there anyone on the phone from the signage company, Integrated Image?
I don't think so, but we do have a participant that is with Rite-Aid. I think her name is Oni, and she's muted. I don't know if she's able to speak to any of those questions.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I'm like, who's handling the national branding strategy for Rite-Aid and making these decisions? Because when I look at the drawings that you submitted, clearly there's permit investigation pages in there that under historical restrictions, someone listed as no. So the due diligence wasn't completed correctly on the consultant or signage vendor end here. So I just didn't know if there was someone on the phone that could answer these questions a little more clear that some folks had. Doesn't sound like it, or Oni,
Well,
you're muted.
You can unmute yourself, Oni. We cannot hear you though. Hello?
Yeah, she went back. They went back on mute. And I guess my only other comment is on those drawings. While it does show the two renderings that you showed us in the earlier in the presentation, there's no specification as to this being painted or a color. It really all just relates back to the sign. So I don't know if there's a clear argument that that was submitted as part of this and got approved for a permit under the guise of this package that you just showed us. So you might want to consider that.
No, I'm not making the assertion that it was approved. I'm just saying that they thought it was approved, that they weren't trying to, do something without the proper permits.
Right, yeah.
And
This is David. Sorry, dude. This is David, the real estate director for Rite-Aid. Exactly what Dean's saying. I don't think anybody would ever want to go against the protocol that we're required to follow. So this is the first I've heard of it. And Don Tebow's on also. He's having trouble getting unmuted, which I think is why I didn't really want to speak up per se, but I can tell you that finding out that this happened, we can go back and investigate and get you better answers. We're not prepared on the phone from Rite-Aid side to explain why that was a miss. I just don't know. I don't know what investigation was done or wasn't done. We do sub the work out to different signage companies. They're supposed to go through the protocol, make sure everything is signed off properly. And so I don't have an answer for you now, but we will get you an answer because we certainly would want to contravene the proper protocols that are required.
Thank you.
So Barbara, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is Oni, and I work for Rite-Aid as a regional construction manager. Our sign company, they have the responsibility to apply for the permits for the signage as well as the painting. And they applied for the permits.
All right.
They applied for the permits, and the city gave us the permit, but I believe the sign vendor missed the fact that we have to go through the historic district to as well get the permit to paint the building. And I reached out to the landlord, asking the landlord that we're about to change the color of the building, and he gave us an authorization to change the color of the building.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's where your mixed up came up from.
Well, thank you for that information. As I mentioned, I need to look at the date on the letter, but and to see if the permission was granted before the letter went out. But it doesn't necessarily matter because the guidelines are the guidelines. And but I do appreciate the information that you've provided.
Heyman Realty is technically the owner, I believe, and they're a very, very large realty company, and they might have just, who knows? I don't want to play, they just own a lot of property, so they might not have had it in the file or whatever, but it still should have been addressed and discussed.
Yeah, and that's why I was asking about permits, if you could show us the permit you had or the one that's on file. If, again, your presentation here with the drawings, I didn't get a chance to flip through all of them, but if it was just pictures showing a building repainted but didn't spell out the work, if they were going in just for a sign permit or sign review, the reviewers maybe had blinders on, were looking at the sign review, figuring that the other process would be followed through for the other changes on the facade. So sometimes those departments will just either address the work as presented and or look at the sign permit issues only, just in the way we also just sort of look at from the LRC side, just the historic district guidelines, and others on this panel will comment on zoning or code review or other things outside the HRC's purview. So again, it's sort of, if you just went for a sign permit I think technically you should have had an HRC over the counter C of A for the signage, is my understanding, but why it didn't go through that process from one agency to another is a curious thing.
Again, this is David again. Let us investigate. We'll figure out what needs to be done, and it'll get fixed. We want to make sure we're complying with everything. It looks like, as Oni said, the sign company must have missed something. They were obligated to do the diligence on what permitting process is. So we'll get to the bottom of it and fix it.
Okay, fair enough. Did the sign company do the painting?
You know, I don't know offhand. It's not really something I'm as involved with. I guess Oni could speak to that, but I don't know. They probably would have given guidance, would be my speculation, but I don't want to speculate too far because it may not have been.
I only ask because we have had a track record of the signage companies are not really versed in architectural building alterations and all the codes and zoning and such. They kind of look at, they know the rules for signage. And if they want a sign permit, they go for a sign permit. And again, they should know that they should have talked to Sarah Quinn at the HRC. But I can tell you many times the signage companies seem to forget or dismiss or don't understand that route. So if they weren't doing the painting and they were just trying to get a sign permit, then the painting never came up in their discussions. I would venture to, speculate.
Right, and I can get to. I'll find out and get the answer for that because I just don't know, and it makes me nervous to sit there and say, yeah, they would have investigated because, like you just said, they're more focused on getting sign permits than they would be building painting. That would be some other. Somebody may not have just checked that, through the proper channels. But we'll get to the bottom of it. We'll take care of it. It's not something we're going to fight this issue at all.
Okay. We appreciate that.
Yep, thank you. So are there any more questions or comments? And if not, we can then move on to 2655 East Carson Street. And Dean is presenting that also.
Barbara, if I could
Yes.
jump in here.
Yes.
Well, our sign vendors are responsible for getting us permits. After the permits, then we reach out to the landlord to get, authorization to paint the building. And that's exactly what we did, nobody informed us, I expect, the sign vendor to inform us that, the building is actually located in an historic district, but we were completely unaware that we needed to get, authorization from the historic district to paint the building.
So I think the remedy, and I could be wrong, is with Rite-Aid and the realty company that owns the property. So it may be it.
I think the other thing is that, Anya, that when they apply, your sign company applied for the signage permit, they're not looking at to paint the facade as a different type of permit, I guess. So it was never going to be all in one. It should have been a two-step process. And they should have made you aware of that because the sign company didn't paint the building, I'm sure. They're typically siloed into their own tasks. Somebody else probably did that. They should have been more informed as to what was needed to permit to do that work. So.
And so a question, Mike, is if this was not in a historic district and the painting would have been permitted, there still would need to have been a permit. Would that be correct? They couldn't just paint. They would need to go to the city to get a permit. Is that correct in what I'm saying?
That's a great question.
That's a tricky question because of the district and
So
right.
If it wasn't a historic district, and to say just the Rite-Aid on the 2300 block of Jane, that's not in the historic district. If Rite Aid was staying there, they wanted to put the branding all there, would they have to go to
No,
the city to get a permit for painting?
no.
I'm gonna give the unfortunate answer of everything is kind of gray. So every neighborhood may have its own design guidelines potentially, or a block because they're historic or because of some other zoning overlay. So we really can't give a blanket answer to
Okay,
that. But you know, it is painting a facade in a historic district, and it's pretty well known that this is a historic district, requires approval.
okay. So again, if there are no more questions or comments for 1915, we can then move on to 2655. Yes?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, you want me to take
Yep.
it from there?
Yep,
Okay.
take it from there, Dean.
Do you see a Rite-Aid logo on the screen?
Mhm.
Okay. So what is being proposed on the corner of, well, at 2655 East Carson? And it's a corner with a rounded front facade. And I created this this enlarged plan just to highlight the highlighted areas, or the areas that we are looking to make modifications to. You can kind of see some of the layout, and in the drawings that we submitted to zoning, it has the complete floor plan, but I tried to distill it down a little bit so we can focus on those couple of areas. The next slide shows the area of that's currently behind the SUV. Is currently an entry that has a recess to it and a covered canopy. As you can see, there's some different materials around the top of the canopy, and even the storefront frame's a little bit different color, and there's some other materials that appears to be a stone-looking material. What we're proposing is to infill that area with a masonry material. It's a thin brick, but the idea is to make it less confusing and more harmonious as you're walking along the street. The existing recess, and you know, it speaks entry and it'd be confusing. So Rite-Aid needs the entry and prefers it on the corner, the main entry. So and there is already a entry there. It makes sense for the street corner. So closing this off is, you know, part of that overall design intent to have the entry on the corner and not to be confusing along the sides of the building. Now we did a Photoshop to show that that infill, but it's difficult, especially with different monitors, to show exactly what that material looks like. But in the next frame is the material that's specified. It's a larger size. It's a utility size, so that's a 4x12 brick, and it's in the gray tone family, similar to what is existing, and would fit in well with the cooler colors of the overall building facade. And then the last page is just a blow up of the areas that are going to be infilled, and then also remove the canopy that also says entrance. in the plan, so I spoke a lot about the areas over to the right, but not so much about the door and the exit door. The entry door, which there's a door existing there, we're proposing to replace that with a Rite-Aid not prototype, but it's consistent with what they do. It's a automatic door. It's, you know, self-opening, and it's going to be a glass door. So we're replacing glass door with a glass door. It'll have some similar visibility to the interior of the store, because on the street level, you know, that's a nice feature to have. So in that, on the corner, we're proposing to replace a glass door with a glass door. And then on the, towards the left is a glass door that we are proposing to put in that existing glass wall. That will match the frames of the existing glass, and that will be exit only. Hopefully that, you know, that's for egress if something happens. Hopefully that door doesn't get used ever, because if it does, that's probably you know, there was an event that people had to get out of the store.
Will that be under special locking? Or
What's that?
will that be under special locking, like the alarm sounds when it opens, or?
I'd have to look at the exact hardware that they specify. I don't have that in front of me, but typically retailers, they want to restrict access so people can't just pick up something and walk out. They like to have it centralized. That's where their you know, their loss prevention detector will be. So I can't speak to the exact hardware, but I'm going to say yes, that's going to be restricted, and there'll be alarm set off or something to that effect. So now I have in front existing, this is basically just a street view. You can kind of see what we're talking about. So that end panel of glass, we would remove that and place a door in there, a glass door. Typically those mullion heads are at a door height, so it really reduces the amount of alteration that we have to do there. And then for the entry door, it's pretty much removing the blue doors and putting in biparting automatic doors.
Hey, Dean, real quick, I'm going to interject real quick. The exit only door does have panic hardware. So it's an alarm sounding panic hardware.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the door you're pointing at now, isn't the plan show actually the next bay is the new entrance there? Which one is being fixed and which one's being established as your?
Are there going to be two doors or just one
It's the
door?
one on the left. It'll be one door.
Okay.
The blue, well, they're both blue.
Yeah.
The blue one on the left.
So the one on the right will just become glazing again?
Yeah, we'll replace the door with glass to match the existing storefront.
Lynn, were you not able to get the brick, the gray brick, the same as it is in the rest of the building? Was that not available? Further down on the, where you're, no, it's, yeah, right.
The material that is shown there, I'm not sure what exactly it is. It's not brick. If it's a manufactured stone or or a stone material of some kind. But I'm not,
This is
I can't speak to the availability of what that exact material is. I believe what was proposed is fits it fairly well. This is if we go a little bit to the side, we get a little different lighting on it, and you can see the gray tones of that material. And even below, there's like a off-color white split base. So I think the material that the landlord has selected to infill that with fits the building fairly well.
So I think what Quaylen and I feel a few of us might feel is that I think it'd look better if you could bring this, reestablish the pilaster stone from the second floor all the way down to the grade, and then find a stone that's close to match that, and then put a water table or the rough cut stone across the bottom. And then the infill brick would be less egregious, I guess, as an infill. But I would prefer myself to see that same stone brought down and just make it look more homogeneous. Anybody else have thoughts on that? It's Mike.
No, but Mike, thank you for making it so clear and explained.
I hope I did.
So Mike, I can talk to that. So the history here is when this building was built, and it is in the district, was built in the district was extended in the South Side Works up to this corner. So this building and Aldi across the street are the eastern edge of the historic district. And it wraps down to the end of that building, the building we're reviewing. So when Cole Haan, which was the shoe store that came in, the building was originally built so all the glass and the stone and everything matched just what's on the left of this view. And Cole Haan wanted to come in and brand their storefront and deviate from that. And my recollection is we reviewed that, and HRC allowed them to take the stone off the pilaster or the column because they really wanted to have the two storefronts united and homogenized as their brand, with the stipulation that the landlord would save that cast stone column and somewhere in the basement or the attic, who knows where. But that was sort of the agreement for approval, was that material was supposed to be brought back if this facade was ever changed after Cole Haan left. So we would like and would probably ask you to research a bit to see if this cast stone is still available. See if the landlord held on to it, if it's in a basement cubbyhole somewhere, or you could reestablish that column, because that was sort of what was talked about years ago when Cole Haan came. And to Mike's point, I think LRC would like to have this building kind of, again, if Cole Haan's gone and Rite-Aid's coming in, restore that column, maybe restore the split face base that you see towards the left that was originally on the building, that changed from a smooth textured stone to a rough textured cast stone, carry that through the base and reestablish that column. So that partie and material, kind of comes back into the fold. I think the infill with the other thin brick, I'm not familiar or know where in the district that has been approved. If you're just sticking it on those materials, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, Dean, what you said. So the canopy's coming off. There's probably going to be some holes and things to patch, but you're just going to do the thin brick and adhere it to all those materials?
I don't believe that's the intent of the landlord. I believe they're going to remove those materials completely.
Okay.
And stud and build it out, stud the walls. And then typically with when you're applying something like that, you need like a cement board backer,
right?
So that it's durable with and moves at the same, I guess, rate as your thin brick, because it's thin, you have to take extra steps to make sure it is durable.
Okay, I appreciate all that, and that all sounds great. So tile or thinner materials, so veneer material like that, is allowed in the district, and typically it's at the base of the storefront, in the historic facades and or new facades where it's the three-part, glass transom, middle window, and a base, stone, brick, tile, thinner material. And those have been allowed. So I guess you could go under the guise of that, but you're doing all the right things to prepare the substrate. So that would be our concern, is are you doing something that could fall off the building or degrade over time? And that sounds like you're taking the right approach that way. There's no other precedent here. So there's no other storefront at the first floor that's infilled with an alternative material other than glass and aluminum storefront, which is probably what I recall was the original, that storefront continued down in those two bays. There might have been an exit back there as well, but something changed here. I think the last comment is sort of your whole presentation will need more documents, more drawings to show exactly what the changes are at the other entrance, at your front door entrance. And you've done a good job. I think you had a decent drawing for what's going on here, along with some samples of the material. HRC will want to see that, but I think you really need to investigate with the landlord if that center column can be reestablished or that material matched and restored, as well as probably the split face base that you see in the other storefronts. And then what you would do where the glass used to be with this other material, tile or thin brick. We tend to not advocate faux materials. So in the way the thin brick's a faux material, you may want to have in your back pocket an alternative, be it tile or something other than a brick that's not really a brick, unless you truly want to infill the panel with true brick, veneer.
Okay, well, yeah, your brick is a veneer, and thin brick is a veneer. It's one just thinner. One's just thinner than the other. It's not a true brick wall, and most of them, the old ones are, but not the new ones.
Laid up, I think, is what we're saying versus peel and stick.
Okay.
If I could comment real quick to kind of piggyback on Bob's suggestions. I mean, ultimately, these bays were meant to be these transparent storefronts and kind of continue that rhythm that's been established throughout this entire development. So, and I've seen it in many other, Walmarts or Rite-Aids where you put in the store, you reinstall the storefront, you restore the storefront, and maybe you just do the spandrel panel backing if you want it for more security or for more privacy. I mean, I feel like, cost, the cost might be an issue, but it's that seems like the best alternative to kind of quote unquote restore this to what would be more original to this development.
I think it's an excellent point. That was my next or another question for Dean is what's happening behind the storefronts that will be an issue for us. So Jody's hitting on an important point. The guidelines want transparency at the first floor and more open glass transparency in storefronts at the first floor in the district. So I second his proposal would be the best way to go and easier to pallet to the HRC. But we know that chain stores like yours don't want all that visibility, would like more product wall area. So the way that's been done at Salvation Army, at Aldi across the street, there they went storefront and they wanted the produce and shelving to come up higher. They did applied graphics to the inside of the glass, but only to a certain level, just about eye level. And we advocated for an HRC, told them to keep the upper part of the storefront transparent so you could see in and at least see the lights are on and that. Or do like some of the other storefronts where you have the transparent storefront, but behind that 2 or 3 feet in is a wall surface that is now a display case. So you have your wares or some other display signage, what you have, whatever, inside the storefront. So we get the appearance of transparency and other than just a blank wall of brick. All that, if you can make those manipulations, would then be a slam dunk with the HRC. Okay. And again, read the district guidelines. When you go into the HRC, you're going to want to kind of go point by point in your presentation. Here's how we address this part of the guideline. Here's how we address this part of the guideline. You're trying to convince the HRC and all of us that you've read them and you're trying to comply, and here's how you're complying. with these deviations. So Jody and I sit on the LRC. We're available after the meeting between now and when you go to HRC with our other members of LRC. We're all architects and worked in the districts. We know the guidelines really well. We can help you formulate your presentation and go further into detail here. Last comment is sort of, you're in a part of the district that is, your building's not historic. So we don't call it what we call contributing. It's a non-contributing building, but it was built to the guidelines as far as new construction back when it was done. Your alterations will have to comply with the guidelines and kind of follow through, but there's nuances here in this part of the district that you can get away. I wouldn't say get away, deviations. You know, the canopies are allowed here that are different than what would be allowed on a historic, you know, contributing building in the district. Lighting is a little bit more modern. So there are you know, shades of gray here that this building and this facade, you'd be allowed to do some things that maybe you couldn't do in other parts of the district with a little bit of flexibility.
Okay.
We can talk about the entrances too.
I just
Only
have
that.
a couple more comments for you, if you don't mind. Permanent signage, temporary signage, and security. I didn't see any permanent new signage in the package, or maybe I missed it. Are you putting signage on top of the new canopy? Is it window? Is it wall mounted? Was there something that I missed? Bob, did you see anything in there? No.
Good question.
No, I don't know. I don't know what the signage proposal is. I don't have that.
Okay.
The signage that they're going to be doing would have to be a separate, or maybe they will combine it once we talk.
Okay, we'll need you to come back to show us that if you could. And then temporary signage. So I live near the current 23rd and Jane location, and I know that in the works it's a little different. There's some structured signage like shingling, you know, that hangs the name of the store. And I believe this location had banners. You can see the metal banners, stanchions still here on the columns. I guess I don't up higher there. Yeah. And I guess I'd like to know that they're either going to be used or not, or removed. And then, and why I say that is because the one on 23rd is kind of like a, it's crazy. They have signage, you know, plastered to every window face, and there's sandwich boards out front. And I don't want it to become this thing that's just visually not pleasing for the district. I'd rather have a level of organization that looked like a corporate front than it looks like, you know, every time they get a free cigarette ad, they throw it up in the window and it's still there 3 years later, sun bleached out, and the sandwich board blows away, so they order a new one. So that's my concern here. You're on a main corner. I want to know that there is going to be a very conscientious effort on your signage and your sort of presentation to the street front. And then finally, just one more comment. The Jane Street one has a pull down grill behind the glass, and it looks like Fort Knox after 9 o'clock. And it's not very neighborly, or, and I don't think it's allowed in the district. Bob, is it not?
Security devices are allowed on the interior, though very few people can pull them off.
Right. So I want to make sure you guys aren't committing to something like that on this major corner. I think that'd be a real shame, and it would send the wrong message about what we're trying to make the district look like at night while you're closed. So could you speak to those 3 items, I guess?
This is David.
I
I can speak to the banners. There's not going to be banners on the building. Absolutely not. I can tell you that the signage, we plan on putting signage above the canopy over the front door. Also in the upper wall on facing 26th, so that there's a presence on eastbound traffic. As far as the security gate, I don't know what typically, because there's just a natural propensity for stores of our type to have security gates on the interior. Now, there's a propensity for people to break into our stores through those doors. We tend to put security gates. I don't know what the plan is on this one. Let me try and find that out and get back to you in a few minutes in the meeting. I don't know if that's even been something that's brought up at this stage.
So again, to Mike's point, I would say security is allowed, and we would probably advocate for a more open gate, grating, not a pull down, solid galvanized metal, opaque door. Is sort of where we're heading, or what we would advocate, something along that. We keep the transparency and the lights are on and lights on the corner and, liveliness to the street when you're closed, but you get the security you need to secure your premises.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's needed on our district here. We don't have a rampant case of smash and grab and run. Lots of, matter of fact, I don't know of any other store on these couple, 3 blocks here that have any type of internal security devices pull down.
Right.
So I don't feel like it's needed. And I think it would change the appearance of your store dramatically after hours. And wouldn't be appreciated, I don't think, by the neighborhood.
So another tricky thing is the East Carson Street Historic District has a separate set of signage guidelines that are overlay the general zoning signage for the city and or the neighborhood. So again, both of the district guidelines and what they call the East Carson Street neighborhood signage guidelines, I believe, are both on the HRC website. So you want to look that up, and there are nuances there again that are specific to the district that are different than anywhere else you're working. Read them
I
carefully.
completely understand. Yeah, absolutely. Based on the initial part of this meeting, dealing with our other store on Carson Street, we will have that discussion with our signing company for the diligence on that perspective. As far as the gates are concerned, I can tell you that we will find a gate that's agreeable. We don't want to create a Fort Knox image either. It's not good for us. It's not good for the appearance. And we agree with you that it would not be consistent with what's being built in the area now and with the existing community. So I'm confident our construction team is extremely workable with these things. They find things that are, there's options out there, and we'll find an option that you're satisfied with. I'm confident of that.
Appreciate the effort.
Absolutely.
So Jackie, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Barb. So David and Dean, when the experts here were weighing in on the infill proposed for the old Cole Haan retail site, Dean, you went back, you said a couple of times, this is what the landlord's doing. This is what the landlord's doing. And then I just looked at your drawing and it says new brick by landlord, and sort of those infills provided by the landlord. So is Samara Road doing this infill, or is Rite-Aid doing the infill?
Well, it's the is it Samara Road?
The developer?
Yep.
Yeah,
So
they'll
why-
do that
okay.
actual
Yeah.
work.
So why isn't Samara Road then presenting that portion of the work? Because it's technically not in scope in the Rite-Aid drawing package.
Mhm.
Correct.
Good evening, everyone. This is Chris McKeon with Samara Road. I've been on the phone. We worked with Rite-Aid to present this so that the community and the Historic Review Commission could see the extent of the changes for the retail space in one holistic view.
Mhm.
And even though based on the way our agreement works and the timing to deliver the space, we have to perform the facade infill change or the facade infill in order to deliver the space to Rite-Aid. That's kind of just part of our coordination, but we did want to present it together. So that's why we're on the phone together, and sorry if that was not made clear at the beginning of our presentation, but I've been on the entire time and I've heard the concerns and suggestions. I can say that to the point of when the Cole Haan space was the Cole Haan space being installed at first, and the landlord at the time was instructed to keep the facade materials. We did kick the tires on making sure that if that happened, our property management company, asset managers, I looked through the building and other retail spaces and could not seem to track that material down. While we've been on the phone here during the presentation, I have triple checked and sending notes to all folks who may have eyes on the building to make sure that we haven't missed something. It's not in another vacant retail space or somehow, got put in the back corner or basement or some other crawl space, just to make sure that hasn't gone overlooked. But So Jody, I hope that, or Jackie, sorry, I hope that kind of answers some of the questions or brings you up to speed a little bit.
No, I'm glad you guys are on the phone. I just want to make sure that once I read those notes on the drawings that somehow this information gets back to you guys. So I'm glad you're on to hear it and address it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we want to be part of this with Rite-Aid too. So
Bob, what I wanted to ask you to speak about, and you alluded to some of that with there are a number of windows that are here. And what are the guidelines for Rite-Aid in regard to what it is that they are permitted to do?
Yeah. So the guidelines want the storefronts to be transparent to the full, I forget the exact text, but to the fullest extent possible, and or to maximize the transparency. There's not a strict formula in terms of square footage or anything like that, but read the guidelines carefully. The spirit is generally to have the storefronts, the first floor in the district, be transparent and open to the interior. Now, the best examples I can give is even at the Rite-Aid in the 1800 block that we were talking about before, when it was CVS, and then later when Rite-Aid came in, both entities wanted to cover up the storefronts other than the entrance door, and did. And I think we brought them in for an enforcement action because they covered every square inch of window with vinyl. And the best we could do, and HRC allowed, was to keep the upper panes. So if we're looking at these storefronts here, just as they've kind of done in this picture, the street view, the lower two bays are sort of graphics applied and the upper part's transparent. That would be the minimum amount of transparency that would be allowed. All of us would advocate for more of it. So again, Aldi across the street kind of did a similar thing. The lower panel in their case is masonry. They have two-part glass or a window of about the same size as these two bays. They put applied graphics to hide the back of the shelving with friendly things, fruits and vegetables and stuff, and they left the upper part transparent. The other technique is, HRC and the guidelines purview is the facade of the building. So technically behind the glass. Business owners have the option to do whatever they want, flashing signs and display cases or whatever, and that we would advocate. And then street view to the left, I think if you roll around again, behind the brown paper, I can see in that bay to the left of the entrance doors, what looks like a painted partition, set back with some down lights there. So that's kind of another technique that's been approved, where you create this 2 or 3 foot zone. You can kind of see between the cracks into the store, but there's something in front of that as a display, information, signage, wares, something that makes this more of an open retail, more friendly facade, so that you're not covering things over. So again, elsewhere in Southside Works, the doggy store, the pet palace, and I think there's a daycare in this block or up the block that's done similar things. There's a number of applied graphics that can be done to the inside of the storefront that find some balance of transparency versus privacy, or opaqueness, or translucency instead of full transparency. There's a couple of different ways to handle it. We would want to refine that with you guys before you go to HRC to get as much transparency as we can, and what works for you as a business and what you want to do with the interior of the store. So it's a bit of interpretation and a back and forth.
We didn't ask if what the hours were going to be, if this was going to be a different, I guess, use than the one on 23rd. It opens at 7, closes at 9. Is this a 7 to 7, 7 to midnight, 24 hours? What is your current sort of programming, I guess, approach for this?
This is David. would imagine our hours are going to probably start off similar to what we have on Jane Street. They may expand a little bit just because of the expanded kind of accoutrements of uses in the area. So my guess is it will probably stay open closer to 10 o'clock would be my guess off the cuff. But that's driven by operations and obviously workflow.
Okay.
But it would certainly be no less than what's at Jane Street. And I think the early opening would be likely, especially since there's going to be a gym across the street. We would want to be able to service those people as well.
And you don't have intentions of selling alcohol here, correct?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Would you be opposed to having two entrances, just like it is under the canopy? Someone may say or ask for a justification or something where the architecture of the building kind of says there's two entrances and a canopy over these two bays. Is that an option?
Two entrances are really make it challenging for us to offer our type of checkout system. Generally speaking, they would prefer to consolidate into a single entry. It's easier for us to just control our store that way, operationally speaking. And also, just to clarify, our hours currently are 8 to 10 at the existing store. So my guess is it'll probably be 7 to 10, because I'm almost certain we would be opening an hour early for the gym.
So are there any more questions or comments? So I would also like to emphasize, as Bob did, about connecting with the local review committee, because they will help you as you prepare to present at the for the HRC, the Historic Review Commission. And so, they're there, to support you. They're supporting the neighborhood. We have had experiences with different businesses that have had to go to HRC 2-3 times because they haven't worked with the LRC. So it would be to your benefit to do that.
And then just in terms of timing, the dam is 30 days minimum. So the earliest you'll go to HRC is the first Wednesday in September. No, I'm sorry, October. You'll miss the first Saturday in September, first Wednesday in September, sorry. So October, or whatever that first Wednesday is, will be the hearing that you could go to. So we have a little bit of time to work with you and get you in shape here.
So Stephanie, if you'd like to share the next step slide.
Absolutely.
And it's since the presentation, both were for the Historic Review Commission. As Bob's mentioned, there are, after this presentation, there are 30 days when Southside Community Council can receive additional comments or even questions. And we will certainly, share those with Dean and others when necessary. And the project goes to the Historic Review Commission, and that can be viewed on YouTube through it's virtual, but you can provide testimony by sending it to the Historic Review Commission at pittsburghpa.gov, and it needs to be received 1 business day before the meeting. You can send a letter to 200 Ross Street, and as I said, you can join in on the Historic Review Commission meeting. And so this project, the recording will go up in a day or two, and that will be on our YouTube page. And for those of you that are not receiving our monthly newsletters, go to our website. You can sign up. Again, We have a revised website that we're very, very proud of, and it's very informational. And our next dam is scheduled for September 16th. As of right now, I don't believe we have any projects, but that doesn't mean we will not have one in September. So if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank those that were on the call and part of the presentation, and the LRC, most definitely, Southside Community Council board members, and for those in the community who spent their time with us and provided questions and comments. And Stephanie Joy, thanks for your hosting and moderating.
Oh, at any time. Jackie, you had your hand up and I just wanted to make sure you didn't have any last minute questions.
Oh, no, sorry. I must have just, that was a misfire. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay, so
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.